Afternoon, everybody. My name is Christopher Logue. I'm from the Mayor's Office of Community Mental Health, welcoming you to our event today, the second workshop in a three-part series in our partnership with the Jed Foundation, Fostering Emotional Well-Being Through Parenthood. Today, we're going to be promoting your mental health as a parent. And so we're going to engage in a lot of conversation for parents on things that you all can do to maintain and promote your mental health. All right, so we have a great set of panelists and a great moderator today. So we're excited about that. We're going to let a little more time for some people to come in, and they'll come in as they can, and we'll get started. I do want to let everyone know that this session is being recorded, and so it's just so that we can have the ability to share out this wonderful presentation in the future. So that you all can share it with your colleagues, other parents that you know. It will be housed on our website, and also we're working with the Jed Foundation to house it on theirs. And so it is recorded. So if you do not feel comfortable, I don't think anybody may be on camera during the recording, but feel free to shut your camera off. And if you are ultimately uncomfortable being recording, then you will leave us and watch this at another time. But hopefully that's not the case. So, as I mentioned, I'm from the Mayor's Office of Community Mental Health, and it's really a citywide commitment to promote mental health for all New Yorkers. And so we work in tandem with 13 city agencies and over 200 nonprofits to provide innovative mental health programming to serve hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers every year, regardless of their documentation status, their insurance status, their ability to pay, all types of things. And so on the strategic partnership teams, which I'm a member of, we try to partner with other organizations and entities to provide mental health programming or, educational opportunities such as this. And so we're very happy that we have been able to partner with the Jed Foundation. Jed Foundation is a nonprofit organization that protects emotional health and prevents suicide for teens and young adults in the United States. They partner with many high schools and colleges throughout the nation to strengthen their mental health, substance misuse, and suicide prevention programs and systems. And they have been a great partner with us on various initiatives, and we're happy to partner with them on this three-part parent workshop. And so one of the main reasons that we wanted to partner on this is we know that there are a lot of parents in the workforce. And so we wanted to try to engage parents in a three-part series. And the first part last week was really about employers and how they can support parents that they employ. And today we're going to be talking about how parents can maintain their mental health. And then next week we have one focused on teens, how we can support the mental health of our teens and young people. And so we have some great teens lined up to speak and provide their perspective and advice to parents, right? And so we may cover some of that today because I believe the panelists are parents of teens. But first, before we get started, we want to have an icebreaker just to get a gauge to see who is in the room. And so, Sophie, if you can launch that poll. We can break the ice a bit. Right. Sophie, could you launch that poll?
I'm sorry, Joe, I think launched it. I no longer can launch it.
Oh, okay. Oh, I may not be able to see it, so I'm not even sure if the poll is up.
It was up.
I see it.
I was doing it, but then it clicked back
So
off.
can you put it up?
Right. Sorry about the technical difficulties with the poll, but a nice little icebreaker poll. First question, I believe, is, are you a parent? Yes or no? And so just to get a gauge to see who is in the room, see who are parents who are here trying to identify resources for other parents that they may work with. They may not be parents themselves. Second question is how many children you have if you are indeed a parent. Please select all the answers that apply to you. And the third question is about parenting structure. What type of parenting structure applies to you? Single parents, parents that are partnered and are parenting together, co-parent situations. Maybe you're not in a relationship with your the other parent of your child, but you are working together to parent this child or these children. And of course, there is communal parenting, I think, is one of the options, which is, the whole village is raising the child, right? Everyone has a piece of it. Maybe I live in the house with my grandma or with my mother, and she's helping me as the grandmother of the kids, something like that. So just to get an idea of what type of structure are involved here today in our workshop. Oh, if you're not a parent, you can't submit, and I do apologize for that. I should have left those questions not required. So sorry about that. So, Josephine, when we get enough responses, you can go ahead and close the poll out and maybe share the results. Maybe we'll be able to see them. Not sure if I'll be able to see them.
The poll has been shared. Can anyone see the poll? I see some head nods.
Okay, good. So I'm imagining that there are parents in the room, that they have kids, different types of parenting structures.
So we have 100% are parents in the room, and sorry for the mix up with the nose there. But how many children do you have? We have 25% that have one child, 65% have 2 children, and 10% have 10 or more.
3 or more.
Oh, 3 or more. Why did I say 10? Jesus. 3 or more.
Mm-hmm.
Then for question 3, which of these parenting structures applies to you? Single parent is 25%, parenting with a partner or spouse, 65%, and co-parenting, 15%.
Okay. Nice. Well, appreciate everyone's responses to the poll. Again, we're very excited to be partnered with the JED Foundation on this. So we have a great panel for you today. We have Dr. Suzanne Button, who's the Senior Clinical Director of High School Programming at the JED Foundation, also a parent, and she'll talk about that, I'm sure. We have 2 great panelists, Dr. Andrea Hamilton, who is the Deputy Director of Community Youth and Families on our team at the Mayor's Office of Community Health, also a parent. She'll talk about that. And we have Jerry Hippolyte, who is the Deputy Director of Compliance for the Cornerstone Unit at Department of Youth and Community Development. And he is also a parent. And so very specific, active perspective from these 3 parents is what you'll get today. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Button, who will take it away.
Thanks so much, Chris, and welcome everybody. I'm so excited to be here today. I am the parent of teenage twins, and when we get to our panel conversation, we'll talk about that a lot. But I'm really struck by how many people said in the poll that they really were struggling with self-care, right? We can all relate to that as parents. Even before the COVID-19 shutdown, right? Parenting was, as a friend of mine said, the best job you'll ever have, the toughest job you'll ever have. And so parents generally experience, right, all the highs and lows of raising a being from birth all the way to young adulthood. We feel stress, we feel worry, we'll feel a sense of burden, right? How are we going to make ends meet? How are we going to feed our kids? How are we going to get our kids what they need? How are our kids going to do? How are our kids doing? What are our relationships going to be like with our kids? And so all of that, those are the normal experiences of parenthood. And sometimes they can lead to mental health challenges for parents, right? Certainly early, right? Moms can be challenged with postpartum depression symptoms, and all of us can experience times of real worry, real stress, real sadness, and even sometimes depression and anxiety. Now, we know even before the COVID-19 shutdown that parents, adults who have people who they are raising, struggle more with mental health challenges. We also know, right, that some communities, particularly communities of color and LGBTQ parents, have a higher level of mental health challenge than their white counterparts. And what we found is that during the COVID-19 shutdown, no surprise, those differences panned out in the increased levels of stress. So, for example, both the CDC and the American Psychological Association have found that during the first year of that pandemic shutdown, parents experienced 5 times more mental health challenges than their adult counterparts who weren't raising kids during this time. And these can be, right, these increases could include postpartum depression symptoms, even suicidal thinking, and those who raised young children during the COVID shutdown or are raising young children experienced even more stress. There's some good news though, right? And that is that when parents reported having good supports in all groups, they actually had lower rates of mental health challenges. So there are some antidotes, right, that we can pick up on. Now, we're going to talk a lot about strategies, and our panelists are going to tell us a little bit about some of the strategies that have worked for them and some of the resources that have worked for them. But it's really important to start with this baseline understanding that parents out there, it's okay to work on your own mental health, right? It's very difficult sometimes for parents to, as we say, put the oxygen mask on themselves first, right? Everybody's heard that metaphor, right? I've heard it 100 times. I've preached it 100 times to the families I work with, right? And in the presentations I do. When the oxygen mask drops down, if you can't breathe, you can't help those around you. True of parents too. If you're having mental health challenges, if you're stressed, if you're worried, if you're lonely, you can't take good care of your kids from that place. But there's a problem, right? Most parents will tell you, you know, my gut is I'm going to take care of my kids first. And when things are tough, like they have been in the past year, my instinct is to really focus in on them. So we want to try and talk about antidotes in a really realistic way. We want to help you think today about how can you come up with antidotes to parent mental health challenges that are actually going to work while you're raising your kids. And if we start thinking about antidotes to mental health challenges, they sort of fall into three really broad categories. The first is self-care, right? So who hasn't heard that? Self-care, 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 right? But we were all, the panelists, we were all teasing when we were getting ready for this presentation that really none of us has time for a yoga class, right? We're too busy balancing, as 55% of you said in the poll just now, we're too busy balancing our work demands and our parenting demands to find time to do that self-care. So today we're going to talk about defining self-care that's realistic for you now, and to include self-care strategies in planning activities and time with your kids, right? So that you build it into your life as a parent. That's really, really important. Another antidote to these mental health challenges that we're going to talk about today: communication and connection. Remember what I said a few minutes ago? We found that parents in COVID-19 were more stressed than their adult counterparts who weren't raising kids. But within that parent group, we found out those who were able to maintain solid connections with important other people, other parents, family members, right? Your tribe, and those who were able to maintain open communication with at least one trusted other, they did a little bit better during the shutdown. So we want to really let you know, right? Connection to others is primary. One thing I've started doing once a week is I go for a walk in the dark on a college campus near me, and I have a 1-hour phone date with my best friend in Alaska, right? And that kind of connection, right? What's doable? You got to ask yourself, and who do you really want to be talking to? If folks could mute themselves, yeah, thank you.
Suzanne, you've been muted.
I'm not sure how that happened. What I want you to know is that when you're communicating and connecting to others, you don't have to do any myth making. One of the really strong things about the COVID-19 times is that we've all gotten pretty honest about the challenges of parenthood. And so we want you to connect with the people you can speak your truth with about how hard it is and how important it is to you, right? And guess what? Finding connection time with your kids counts. Not always easy with a teenager, but finding that emotional connection with your kids can be feeding to you too. And we're also going to talk too in our panel today about the third antidote to parent mental health challenges, and that is finding the right supports for you and for your family. There's so many supports, and I know later Chris is going to talk about the resource guide and some other places you can go. We want you to know your resources before you reach a crisis point. So if you're checking out what's out there, shop around a little bit, check out what's helpful to you. And remember, resources should be a match for you, your family, your family values and your family culture. The match between the resource you choose and how helpful it's going to be is really, really important. So, I want to open it up now to our wonderful panel of parents, and also really want to ask participants to feel free to chat into the answers to these questions so that we can have a conversation with the group about what are some of the stressors and challenges that have come up for you during the pandemic as a parent specifically. What are some of the difficulties?
Hi, I'm happy to jump in. I'm Andrea Hamilton. I'm going to speak from my professional and also my personal experience as a parent. I am a single mother of two boys, a tween and a teen. And, I'm just realizing as we're talking about this time that's gone past during the pandemic that my youngest was actually not even a tween when this whole thing started. He was 10. And he's really kind of grown up so much in a way during this time, a completely different child in a way, developmentally. So that just struck me. But I think in terms of talking about self-care and what what's been most helpful to me during the pandemic, I can say definitely the thing that I've missed the most, and also the thing that's been most helpful, has been my connection day to day with other parents. Pre-pandemic, I had a regular routine of dropping my kids off at school every day, and I'm sure many of you can relate to this, seeing parents who had become my friends, over the years. And those conversations we had just on the fly as we're dropping and then running off to our jobs or to do whatever we needed to do that day were so enriching to me. And when school shut down in March 2020, that's the first thing that I noticed was just suddenly absent that I really, really needed. So I needed to find a way to reconstruct that support system from my own home as me and my children hunkered down and really didn't leave the house for months at a time. And what I did was I started to reach out. It was mostly texting, but just made a point of texting parents I knew, old friends, some people from my day-to-day life pre-pandemic, but then also other people who I hadn't seen in a long time and who were maybe living in other states or other parts of the world who I hadn't been in regular contact with, suddenly also became very important to my support system. And I really had to make that conscious effort to recreate that drop-off time for myself with my friends, just to check in and ask them how they're doing, tell them how I'm doing, commiserate about how crazy the situation was, tell them about how my kids were doing, get their advice, give them advice. So we really had an informal kind of support group going on text and occasionally by calling. But that was really important for me.
I really appreciate how you basically curated your own parental connection digitally, Andrea. It was really, really masterful, right? And I'm curious, now that things are starting to open back up or are opening back up, are you finding that you're reconnecting easily with other parents? Are you out of the habit of connecting with other parents?
Kind of out of the habit, I think, of connecting face to face, because of course I don't do the drop off anymore. Now my youngest is older. They don't do early morning programming anymore. So we don't leave at the same time. He is home sometimes when I leave, which is a real adjustment for me and for him to have to make. So I've really had to keep up that digital connection with my friends, and that's really continued. Not much is happening like in real time, face to face in real time, I should say, yet. But I'm looking forward to that. I can't wait to get together more often with people in person. But it's also hard to fit that into a day when you're going back to work and struggling to find the time, as you mentioned before.
Yes, Zoom time is back to back to back. Jerry, how about you? What are some of the typical stressors that you've struggled with and some ways that you've applied some antidotes?
Thank you for that, Susan. And really to piggyback on what Andrea said, a lot of it really spoke to finding that support system. So again, Jerry Hippolyte, I am a father of an amazing daughter who is now in first year of college, and I'm super excited about that. But during the pandemic, right, that was so there's multiple transitions happening, right? From a national perspective, the transition of what this looks like to just operate under COVID, and then her transitioning in school. And so as a co-parenting has its own stressors that you have to work with, right? Having to really know how to communicate, making sure that certain guidelines, that you are just in alignment with your co-parent. Like the best way to really be there for your child is to have a really strong relationship with your co-parent. And so what the pandemic did was that whatever cracks were between us, all it did was heighten it. So I had to be that much more better in communication, that much better with time and scheduling. And what used to be really simple of coming by or whatever, because of COVID, it was just more restrictive. So one, just not having the access that was already limited to begin with was already something that I had to find challenge within myself. And then being very intentional with scheduling and what did that look like, and all at the same time. When you are an actual, by profession, I'm gonna take a little bit from Andrea, in the counseling in the mental health world, you're kind of looked at that in the family. So when something does happen, the first person that they come to specifically be my daughter, or just following me around, hey, how do you do this? And we were all trying to figure it out simultaneously. And so just being able to live multiple transitions at the time. And I think the first thing was understanding where I was to first pause. The second thing is really shore up whatever areas that were cracked. So communication was big, making sure that I was very intentional with time, because COVID made time even that much more limited or that much more restrictive. And then as relates with my daughter, meeting her where she was, where before the pandemic, it was, hey, how was your grades? We had all these beautiful check-ins. It was less about grades more than was just, how are you doing? Hey, let's figure it out. Let's redesign your room. Let's redesign your workspace. And I'll come and we just recreated it so that it was more work friendly. And then she did the same for me. I need to know what my time zones are, right? And the reason why I say time zones, work became blurred. What you knew was a cutoff at 5. Now you were getting phone calls at like 8, 9, and those would be our time. And she had to say, hey, I still need my time. And so the last thing that really was lifted to me, and she were actually reminding me today, was redefining and reaffirming roles, that I am your dad and I'm in this space and I'm going to be here. And so once I got that in hand, with the pandemic, it became less for stress, and that became more freedom. And then the loop around was going back to work, because I had this newfound access and freedom and discovery. And so we were like, what are we going to do with our new rooms, right? Because it was all redesigned. And so we're now creating different ways to just engage in that a little bit more. We want to take this to move forward as opposed to taking a long step back.
Thanks, Jerry. And I'm really appreciating how that's a great example of how your self-care strategies and your daughter's were not mutually exclusive, that she needed your time and you needed to stop working. And that was a way to connect with her, but also to step away from the stress of work and care for yourself. I want to turn to the chat, because a few people, and I want to thank you all for sharing some of the stressors that you experienced during this past 20 months. Somebody said tantrums, right? How the heck do you deal with a tantrum when you're at work on Zoom? That we could have a whole workshop about, right? Work delays, remote work delays, right? Changes, as Jerry said, right, in the schedule and how that was going to go. Someone else said lack of communication with my daughters, right? So tweens and teens, they're not always so transparent about how they're doing and how they're feeling, right? So some of us struggled with that, right? I know that at my house, we have 2 14-year-olds, and sometimes it was pretty hard to figure out where they were at, because they didn't really want to talk about their feelings, especially because their mom's a psychologist, you might guess. they don't always want to talk about their feelings, right? And then someone else said, my son is an extrovert and he really misses going to classes and seeing his peers, right? So that connection piece, some kids thrive on it, right? And we really had to struggle to figure out how to make that happen during the shutdown. Great examples. So panelists, I wanted to check in about, right, finding mental health support for your kids. And I'll just share a little bit of my own experience in the last 20 months. Each of my teens went through a period over the last 20 months at different times where I was pretty worried about their mental health. One of them got very sad. My daughter's a pretty vivacious, pretty outgoing person. And she became very sad, very withdrawn, very grumpy for a number of months. And so I was really worried about her. She was really feeling depressed. And then I watched my son at a different period get really worried and really anxious and sort of start doing a little too much exercising and being a little too weird about what he was eating. And I know that I really, really worried, and I wondered sort of where to go, who can I go to, given that I'm a psychologist, my kids don't want to talk about their feelings. What was the right support for me? So I want to check in, Andrea and Jerry, did you have moments like that with your kids, and did you struggle with where to go and how to connect with supports?
Yes, absolutely, Suzanne. And I noticed 70% of us here have, acknowledged that we were concerned about the emotional well-being of our children. It is totally normal to have been through something quite dramatic and awful with kids during this time. Many children have struggled tremendously. For me, really my biggest concern was with my youngest son, who, like Evelyn, he's an extrovert. He really thrived on friendships and getting together with friends, and suddenly that was all cut off. He had a pretty severe depression during the pandemic and periods of tantruming at 10 that looked like he was, more like a toddler, actually, screaming, kicking, thrashing. He also had symptoms of eating disorder as well, not eating, trying to find that control with the food. And I was really alarmed and very concerned. So the first person I reached out to actually was one of his teachers at school who knew him really well. I asked if she had seen any of the behaviors that I was seeing at home, and she said she hadn't, which was really a relief to me that he wasn't acting out at school in any way or seemed unable to learn. But of course, when the Zoom went off, he was a different child. But she connected me to a number of resources in the school, the guidance counselor and also the vice principal, who really, I'd say, became some of my closest friends over the pandemic, because I was so frequently in touch with them about how he was doing. But he started counseling in school, which was very, very helpful for him. And he was on Zoom. And then when they went to a hybrid model, he was able to see the counselor in person when they were during days in school. And also the vice principal kind of kept an eye on him and pulled him out and had one-on-one conversations with him at times, and would, reconnect with me to let me know how he was doing. And we just sort of together provided him with that support that he needed. And then as the restrictions on face-to-face time lifted and he was able to get back to friends, then he really improved quite a bit.
Thank you. Yeah.
Just want to agree with Andrea. I think, so just to take a step back, I know this is about our kids, but I don't know too many people who didn't experience some type of reaction to COVID, right? Whether you're adult, child, as I'll be specific with my daughter, and I'm gonna take a step back because just the community that we're in with my daughter, one, I had to let her know it was okay and just give grace. It goes back to what I had mentioned earlier. Some of the maybe hard stances that we took as co-parents before were like, hey, this needs to happen, and chores and grades. Maybe we take a little step back and we do different things a little bit more creatively, because it's a lot for all of us. One of the things or signs and symptoms that she started exhibiting was withdrawal, not in the sense that she never had a large group, but there's a difference between loneliness and isolation. And so she would just begin to isolate herself. And then I also saw her grades dip a little bit more drastic than the norm, right? And we opened up space for that conversation. What that began to look like was, one, her knowing that she wasn't by herself and that she had support. Two, because everything was closed down, she was also very close knit with her faith-based group, her youth faith-based group. That's a tongue twister, right? And all that to say, I helped her organize just reconnecting what that looks like, because maybe we know how to reconnect through Zoom, but not all teens or tweens or even young adults know how to do that. So creating a group chat on IG as well as different formats that you can kind of push them towards, but for them to just get reacquainted with. And then from there, giving her activities where she can continue to bond with. So we would do exercises, different stuff together. And then she kind of beat me in the whole workout regime and started doing things on her own. But creating some sense of stability and normalcy. And I think that was like the number one thing, creating a space for normalcy. And then the other part was letting her know that she wasn't by herself and there was grace to, hey, we're all trying to figure this out.
And I just want to shout out, Jerry said, let's take a step back because we all experience mental health challenges. And you notice how we're all parents here. So, and even in the chat, folks are talking about their worries about their kids' mental health. So shout into the chat how your mental health was, particularly when you saw your kids start to struggle, but just generally, what happens? Like for me, I get really gripped. I get gripped with worry when I see my kids struggling. For all my fancy degrees and expertise, I think, oh, I don't know what to do. I'm not sure how to help. I get really afraid and worried and anxious. What do other people feel when they saw their kids struggling? What did they feel, or what do they feel these days when they see their kids struggling with mental health? And Andrea and Jerry, you can chime right in, but I want to open it up in the chat too.
Yeah, I could say I can identify with you, and you're getting kind of, gripped. As a psychologist and a therapist, the first thing I want to do is talk to my boys, and I'm like, I'm here for you. I really want to hear how you're doing. Tell me how you're feeling. Tell me what you're, and they don't always want that. And sometimes I have to realize that what they really need, as Jerry was saying, to create that space, like of, saying like, yes, I'm here for you, but then I'm gonna step back a little bit and let you come to me when you need me, instead of going after them all the time. And I think that was especially important during the time when we were inside all the time together. It was just a little bit too much togetherness, and at times what we all needed was the separation. But I struggled with giving that space because I wanted to hear everything that they were thinking. And
totally agree. I would say when you're in the profession that we're in, it's almost like I tell a lot of people, hey, do not go on WebMD because you're going to see a whole bunch of signs and symptoms, and that might not be the case. And when you are like locked in a room for too long, you start seeing things that may not even be a true narrative, right? So it's like, okay, I think for myself, it was really, I always like getting a 360 like evaluation of, hey, am I seeing the same thing you're seeing? So going back to as a co-parent, I would check in with my daughter's mom. Hey, are you seeing the same thing I'm seeing? And what does this look like for you? Because maybe I'm only getting a glimpse of it. And then from there, like, what can we do? What resource can we give? The school was really helpful. It was tough because on my end, she was transitioning out. So the guidance counselor and the principal, there was like a gap in space and what that looked like. But I was fortunate to have one, great support system and family. We actually did almost borderline communal family parenting, as well as there were other, we have other members in the social work field that are family members, friends that I could refer to. So it wasn't, you're really my dad and you don't want to hear this. And like, I'm not, there's actually a bias because I'm her dad that I can't speak to it. And I understand sometimes I'm not the one, maybe it is somebody else, and making sure that that person is available for her.
And I'm just noticing in the chat, I'm really appreciating the courage everybody's showing, just sharing some of the ways they worried, sleeplessness, anxiety, feelings of helplessness and overwhelm, right? All of these are really understandable. And you hear how we've all been struggling with them. Let's switch a little bit. We just have a few minutes before we want to open it up for some questions from all of you. But panelists, let's talk a little bit about some of those antidotes for ourselves, right? So how did you incorporate self-care? How did you incorporate, Andrea, you already said a little bit about connection, but let's face it, we're always stretched. And during COVID, we were even more stretched as working parents, as parents. How did you do it? How did you work those antidotes into your day? And how are you doing it now?
Yeah, I think everything that I had been doing before, I tried to do in like a smaller form. So I had been able to exercise on a regular basis at a gym or, swim. All of that was really important to my self-care. But I just made a point of saying, okay, I'm just going to move. I'm going to move in some way. It's going to be smaller movement with less distance, maybe just stretching, maybe standing up, maybe walking around the block a few times a day. And I did check in with myself at the end of the day. If it was nighttime and I was about to kind of wind down the day and I hadn't done that, then I just would leave the house and say, okay, I'm going to walk around the block a couple of times and then come back. And that kind of consistency really helped me. I think maintaining some structure and consistency to my day in general really helped. Because so many things were different. There was so much loss and change. I just needed some things to be the same. Like I want to have my favorite food, once or twice a week, or I want to do a favorite activity with my kids still together, like once a week. I think at one point I said, like, okay, Sunday dinner, we're going to turn off the TV because of course we were all like addicted to TV. We're going to turn it off for 15 minutes and have a conversation, ask each other how we're doing, say something, even if it's just one sentence about our day, and connect as a family. And we did that, and that really helped.
Thanks.
Yeah, to build on Andrea for that, the need to have a system or a structure in place was definitely something that I was yearning for. I would say the things that helped me out was what was blatant in my face with the pandemic, which was just to stop. just stop, right? And I had to give myself permission to stop. I had to give myself the courage to recreate, to create a new rhythm of what that looked like, and to know that I had full control of that narrative. And that gave me stability in and of itself. And it also created a brand new world, not just for myself, but also for parenting as a whole. Like I can create something totally brand new and our relationship can really look different. And so a part of my self-care was knowing that I had space to be mentally, physically, and emotionally available and present for the work that I do, but more importantly, for the people that I love. And that relates to my daughter. And that showed itself in making sure that I did exercise. So even though she did become better than me, it became a healthy competition, right? I also learned to just be gentle with myself and also to be gentle with her in what that looked like. And then the final piece, I think, because we're in a new space now of transitioning back to work, right? Knowing in my mind to move forward and not go back. There's a quote, I don't remember by who, but the same man can never walk in the same river twice because he's no longer the same man and that is no longer the same river. And so I can't go back to, hey, we used to do, no, let's create, remember that room that we recreated? Let's add to it. Let's see what's the new thing we can do it. I learned to stop work at a specific time to make sure I had time. That's not going to change. I'm still going to do this thing. And those things give me, I don't want to say comfort, I would say more courage to be that much better of a parent in this new space that we're in.
Yeah, I appreciate that so much, the learning that we all went through as parents and about our own priorities, right? How do we carry that forward? Because some of that is self-care. I know that for me, the connections to the friends that I can be honest with and they're honest with me, those are the friendships I stuck with during the COVID shutdown. I didn't want to talk about those people who were always saying how great they're doing and bragging about how perfect their kids are. I wanted to be with people who I could talk the real deal with. And so that's really stuck for me. after, as we start to open back up, right, is that valued time, right? It's the time with my kids, the time with my partner, and the time with the friends who speak truth and who I can speak my truth to them. Yeah. So let's turn our attention to some Q&A, participants. Our panelists would love to hear your questions. You can chat them in if you want, and we'll do our best to answer them. Anything we can help you out with in terms of sharing experiences and thinking through some of the questions you might have about supporting your own mental health as a parent.
If I could just jump in while the questions are coming in, I'm going to add to this, and I would love to I would love to hear from Andrea as well. I would just want to throw this out there. Sometimes you hear us talk when we talk about self-care. It is not all self-care is this grandiose thing. It could be something really simple as walking, taking 5 minutes to count down your breathing. It can be meditation. It could be prayer. I saw some great things in the chat. It's really that thing that centers you, brings your thoughts as well as your heartbeat down to really bring your best self forward. So I just want to minimize something that gives such big impact to know it's very attainable and reachable in that space.
As Jerry, I totally appreciate that. You know, the in the moment stress relievers are so valuable, like the box breathing, you know, in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, that you can do anytime. You know, that really helped me. I love that someone put in the chat that prayer, meditation, going for morning walks, like prayer became important for me and my children. You know, we never prayed together before, but my older son, during this time especially, really wanted to pray out loud together. So we did that. It was enormously soothing and comforting. And for me, like just to pray, because you can do that anytime,
right.
Just to connect to something sort of larger than yourself that you feel is helping lift you up and support you through this time. It's really helpful.
Totally agree. I know that there's a couple of things in the chat. I even want to make room for those who are communal parenting. This may even be for people who are childless parenting. What does that look like? Maybe you're auntie and you took on the role of childcare because the actual parent didn't have the opportunity to go to work, and this was more of a lift for you. What is that across the board? Just those different levels of communication. 1, thank you, right? 2, we're doing it together, and it's okay to say, hey, I need a break. I need to take a step back, right? And what that looks like. And one of the areas that it has done me well planting that seed for my daughter younger, but you could do it at any time, which is emotional coaching. And really what that looks like is being able to name and label what you're feeling in the moment, right? Hey, I feel this, and this is what that looks like. And then creating a space for that. And I think, I believe COVID did that, but I don't want to take it for granted. Openly, if you just say, hey, you know what, this is how I feel today, and you express it and show it, and then create best practices to recenter yourself, that's emotional coaching. And if you share that with your child or the children that you serve or love on, it would do a great way because they now know how to express how they feel in that moment.
Well said. I also see some other copings in the chat. Somebody said, I love this one. Vicky said, going to the grocery store by myself.
Yes.
And that fits right in with what you're both saying, which is it's the small things, just that breather. You know, I might have a long work day and I might not have time for a walk, but I sure have time to walk down to the end of my road and back for 2 or 3 minutes and just have a quiet minute and take that breather. There are a lot of questions in the chat about resources, and I just want to let folks know we're going to move to that in just a minute. Chris is going to walk us through some resources and some resource guides for folks, because one of the pieces people are putting in the chat is it's been really hard to get services, right? There's a lot of need out there, and where do I go, and why are the waiting lists so long? So we're going to try and offer you some support in that regard too today. Panelists, anything you want to shout out that we haven't talked about yet before we pass it back to Chris to talk about some resources?
I just wanted to recognize that a couple people in the chat expressed some frustration about children being in therapy, but not wanting to attend or not wanting to participate. And I just want to say, you know, yeah, I mean, traditionally, we want our kids to go to therapy like once a week and talk and be engaged and But I think, you know, I can speak for myself and my youngest child who went to therapy during the pandemic. You know, we needed to be flexible. There were some days when he didn't want to go and he didn't feel like talking. And his counselor, thank goodness, was really, really flexible, just met him where he was. You know, sometimes she would sit with him. He wouldn't say anything, but she sat with him. Other times, you know, she'd say, you know what, let's just do this next time. Let's do it next week. That's fine if you don't want to come this time. And I really think that's what we need to do for our children. You know, these traditional models, rigid models of therapy and counseling just really are not meeting kids where they are and not helpful enough. I think we need to be flexible.
I agree. I want to second what Andrea said. I can go from my daughter to even one of my most recent youth that I work with. I know, just as an example, we might have spent maybe 3 sessions where maybe there were 5 words, and then out of nowhere in the 5th session, I couldn't get him to stop. And I say that to say to just leave room for the process, right? Definitely let them be where they are. A lot of times we try to project the outcome of what the relationship is supposed to look like and want things to happen at a certain speed, when it's just them developing, learning, being curious and trying to figure it out. And that's okay. And that's the one thing that I want to leave from the onset of the pandemic to where we are right now. It is okay to feel how you feel right now. And it is okay where we are, and we have the resources to take it to the next step, actually to get the help that we need and then get to the place that we want to get to. And that is inclusive of our children.
And, you know, Andrea and Jerry, you're both talking about something for our kids that we need to do for ourselves. And someone at JED said to me early on last year, hey, we've all got to give ourselves grace. And I think we're talking about giving our kids grace, but let's all also give ourselves grace as parents, right? That same idea of what the shape of parenthood should or shouldn't look like right now, right? We got to give ourselves that break, give ourselves that grace, understand that we're doing what we need to do. We're doing the best we can, and we deserve that grace too. So I want to pass it back to Chris. This is going to talk a little bit about resources.
Yes. First, I want to thank you, all 3 of you, you know, and all the parents that are in the chat that have participated throughout the session, just sharing their personal situations, things that help them cope. Someone now mentioning how they were able to find a therapist is beautiful, trying to create that sense of community and connection that all of you spoke about. I'm going to share my screen real quickly and just go into a couple of tools that our office has created. So on this slide, we have 3 different guides that our office has created. The first one is mental health resources for parents and teens. And so we'll send these slides out. But, you know, this guide creates compiles all types of resources that are for young people in terms of different ways that they can find connections, if they want to speak to somebody, if they want to chat with somebody, things of that nature, but then also resources for parents, right? And so how you might be able to find a group of other parents who are maybe dealing with similar issues, or different ways that you can access mental health resources for yourself, or ways that you can go about accessing mental health resources for your young person, right? So this is a great guide that our office put together. We'll definitely include it in the follow-up, but it's here. And then also we have another guide, resources to support caregiver mental health. And so, you know, some parents have a dual role where they are taking care of their young people, right? But then they're also taking care of someone else, maybe one of their parents, right? Or an elder member of their family. And so being a caregiver, whether that's for a young person or an older person, it can also be a strain. And so we compiled some resources for caregivers as well. And so those of you that are in that dual situation, this can be a helpful guide for you. And then lastly, we have one which we partnered with, the JED Foundation provided the artwork, right, through a partnership that we had with them in previous years. But this is a guide for young people, right? And it talks about all the different mental health resources that are available for young people here in New York City through DYCD or other city entities. So a lot of the services will be free, right? And so there are, you know, locations where you can go, you know, drop-in centers throughout the city, or just other resources that are available for young people to have someone to speak to. And during the pandemic, as we alluded to, everything kind of went virtual if it wasn't virtual already. And so some of these resources are available virtually. And of course, there's NYC Well, not listed here, but this is the city's 24-hour a day, 7-day a week helpline, support line. And so it is staffed by mental health practitioners. So if you text or call into that line, you'll be paired with a mental health practitioner on the other end, and they'll be able to provide some short-term intermediate relief and work with you on identifying long-term solutions and support that's in your area, right? And so NYC Well, if you go on Google and type in NYC Well, it'll come up. And so these are some great resources and ways to find resources. So even if you want to reach out to NYC Well and say, hey, I'm looking for a therapist for my youngster, or, you know, I've been experiencing a lot of things and I want to talk to someone, they can work with you on identifying some resources that are available in your community. All right. So definitely some great resources are available. We want to highlight that next week on Tuesday, we have our final workshop in this 3-part series, and it is geared to teen mental health. And so a lot of you mentioned different struggles that your young people were having that you noticed. And so maybe this is something that you all can come to as a family. The invitation is open for everyone. There will be young people who will be talking about their own emotional well-being and things that they experience and ways that they were able to access support. So maybe your young person can see that and hear that and, you know, feel that they're not alone in their struggles. But at the very least, you'll be able to get some information to take back to your young person. So if you see this QR code, you put your phone up, hit the camera button, it'll take you to the page to register. But all of you know how to register because you registered for this session. So definitely want to thank the panelists, want to thank Dr. Button for moderating such a great conversation, a lot of great insight. I also agree with everything that was said, but very particular with showing ourselves some compassion, right? I also am a clinician, so we're all on the same wavelength in that regard, but we always have to show ourselves some compassion, right? COVID and parenting in general, very stressful, right? And so you all are doing the best that you can and continuing to find resources for yourself and for your child. And that's evidenced by you being here. So show yourself some compassion and keep up the great work. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen